Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. So that's good. That's a good segue, Mike. Let's move on to Allure Aesthetics.
So Allure Aesthetics, which is not linked, I had to make that conscious choice to not link to them. Allure Aesthetics, run by Dr. Javad Sajan in Seattle, recently was the recipient of a summary judgment in a case brought by the Washington Attorney General in federal court based on the Consumer Review Fairness Act of 2016, where he was convicted of restricting users of his service, which is aesthetic surgery, from either leaving reviews. Before they left a review, he had them sign an NDA, and before they left a review, they would have to, if it was less than a 4, they would have to consult with him to tell him about the review. And if it was less than a 4 and got posted, he would have the right to publish a response that included HIPAA-based information. So
he's blackmailing them, essentially.
He's basically blackmailing them. That's correct. Under an NDA, forced to sign after he charged them $100 consulting fee. It was part of all the paperwork. And the judge issued a summary judgment. Now, there's many other things this guy did. He had his employees and his relatives lead reviews. He had his web designers set up personas and lead fake reviews. But the initial summary judgment is specifically about this NDA, which it claimed that he had 10,000 people sign these NDAs. So he's very busy over a 4-year period. I think it was
That was only 4 years?
I think it was 4 years, right? It was 2017.
Wow, this guy is really busy.
Or something. Very busy. And so interesting. It's the first case serious case that's been brought in federal court under the Consumer Review Fairness Act. So that's significant. This isn't just sort of an FTC or a advertising guidance violation, which is civil. This is a federal violation brought in federal court in which there was summary judgment. So there was agreement to the facts. They got a summary judgment. Now, the rest of the case is still to be tried. But when the trial does occur, this part of the case, the only thing that's going to happen in this trial is how much does he owe, right?
Right. So the liability phase was determined on summary judgment, and now it's about the penalty, the
right.
The
at least for this aspect. Again, there's other aspects of the case that are ongoing. Yeah. And so it was fascinating to me on several levels. One, this guy has gone to great lengths. I mean, he currently has 917 reviews at Google, 4.8. He has a 4.5 at Yelp and 150 reviews, both of which are high for this type of business. Now at Yelp, they put one of their little red warning signs up that
a badge of shame.
A badge of shame that there's been that there's been questionable legal threats by the business, been accused of that, and there's at least one review to that effect. Google has done nothing about it, so he's still showing and still benefiting, even though he's been convicted, even though this case has been on the docket since December of 2022. Google hasn't done anything about this, and he's still benefiting from that. And
he's spamming his business name in his Google business profile.
Yes, it's Allure Esthetic, Dr.
In clear violation of so many
Sajan, best plastic surgeon, Seattle is his business name. Yes. Yeah. He has 2 other locations, which, as far as I could tell, is not engaged in the same level of, the much lower levels of deceit. So it's just interesting. One, that's first federal case. Clearly, the guy had to go out of his way to break this law. I mean, this is something that goes back years and years, and I thought every business was aware that they couldn't contractually obligate their clients not to leave reviews anyway. But it's just fascinating the way Google and Yelp both sort of half-assed dealt with it. And it, for me, proof that Google is really incapable of catching these more sophisticated scams, even after they occur.
Yeah, it leads you to think, I mean, this is very, very elaborate and very sort of, expansive, but it makes you think that this kind of stuff is going on all the time in the background at varying levels of sophistication, and it's just not being punished for the most part.
Right. And you did some math. He did 10,000 of these NDAs over a 4-year period. You looked it up.
Well, if every surgery is, like nose jobs cost $3,000 to $4,000, and breast enlargements cost $6,000-$7,000, and there's a whole bunch of other surgeries that people do. So if you figure that on average people are spending $4,000 per surgery, and he's got 10,000 people signing these NDAs, if those are all patients, that's $40 million worth of income for him that may have been touched by this kind of manipulation.
Right. So in New York State, where there was a surgeon who wasn't doing the NDA, wasn't pre-obligating them to not leave a review in any way, he was fined $100,000 for these more civil type violations. But here's a criminal violation, or at least a violation of federal law. And I don't know if there's a penalty mentioned in the bill, but clearly the benefits were great to this guy. The fines, as David noted, in New York State were inadequate. Hopefully the fines here will be something much more significant.
Well, I mean, this conceivably could destroy the guy's practice if this gets out, right? I mean, if this is publicized, this case is well publicized in Washington, and it's associated enough with his name. When people search his name, you're going to see some sort of item about this, and that could destroy his practice. I mean, would you get a boob job at this guy's place if you knew that he was convicted in some case?
Yes. So right now, when you do a brand search, Allure Aesthetic Plastic Surgery, for example, the second result is from a TV station about the case coming. The third result's Yelp. The fourth result is the Washington government. The fifth result is about the case. The sixth result's about the case. So he's got a huge issue that he's presented
reputational damage.
He can always restart a new practice under a different business name, right?
Yes, so it's true. Yeah. It's true.
He could just call himself Best Plastic Surgeon Seattle instead of Allure Aesthetic Best Practice Surgeon. Right.
That's right.
We'll put a parental warning at the beginning of the podcast for my reference to breast augmentation.
It's all right. This is not a PG-13 podcast. It's okay.
Okay. So, so what would you, I mean, are we just now living in this kind of perpetual whack-a-mole world where people are, these more and more elaborate schemes are just showing up?
Yeah. And I think, when I don't know if you remember last summer when I analyzed who Google was targeting with their new review algorithm, they were targeting new businesses in the home services and legal services.
Right.
As a statistical probability, those guys are going to cheat, whereas it's obvious that cheating goes wherever the money is. If there's money, like in plastic surgery, then Google needs to obviously be more concerned with fake reviews in areas where there's big money, and so far they're not. They give these guys a pass.
Well, I think this is a perfect example of Lena Khan's comment, FTC Chair Lena Khan, on Jon Stewart a couple of weeks ago, saying that this attitude of being too big to care is really what defines a monopoly in the year 2024. And to me, that clearly applies to Google as it relates to Google Business Profile spam, review spam. It just seems like this is Mike. You and I in particular have been looking at this for 16 years, and seems like it's not really any better. So,
no, and it's not only not better, but it's occurring. I mean, this is a level of both moral and criminal deceit that it's really hard. It's beyond the pale. It's one thing to have your locksmith rip you off. It's another to have your plastic surgeon rip you off.
Right. It is a your money or your life query in many ways. In both ways. Yeah.
So that's what Google should be doing, is, as you said, Mike, is they should really be scrutinizing these YMYL categories where there are more costly, more impactful decisions, and bringing an extra level of attention to those reviews, because consumers are relying on reviews, even though there's some growing wariness about fraud. And if you make the wrong decision, I mean, it really results. I mean, if you've documented this, and Curtis Boyd has certainly documented this in with the transparency company. If you make the wrong decision, there's not only an opportunity cost, but you can really screw yourself pretty badly. Like a botched, nose job or facelift or something can, leave lifelong scars, literally and figuratively. Or a lawyer who's incompetent. I mean, there's a lot at stake in these situations, and people really are relying on these reviews to make these decisions. And it's a major problem, and the stakes are so high for the businesses that they have incentives to cheat. They have a high degree of, and the cheating is there's a gray area, right? I mean, there's some really egregious behavior like this guy, but there's a lot of low level cheating that's happening all the time. Friends and family writing reviews, people asking for reviews from people that have not used the business, that kind of stuff. That's against the terms, but that's very, very common. And so,
right. And when you do a search on Seattle plastic surgery, I just did.
Oh yeah, he's number 2.
Right. And he has 2 spots in the pack, and he's second organically. Right.
Yeah.
So
and to your point, David, about sort of too big to care, on the ground in Washington, this is a big deal. But Google's business is so massive. Sort of back to my point about the concentration of wealth. Their business is so massive, and the scale is so massive that they really don't have the ability to pay attention at this level, and it's resulting in harm.
Yep. Well, to me, the original sort of vector of antitrust law of consumer harm also applies here, but the more modern interpretation has clearly been apparent with Google's behavior for far too long. So.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.